So everybody, thanks so much for listening to Fire Breathing Rob. If you're listening to us on the radio, we thank you for that. If you're listening to us on YouTube or one of the other platforms, such as the podcasting, thanks so much too. We appreciate that. Please like, subscribe, and share this interview. This is Michelle Elman here on Fire Breathing Rob. She has put out 2 books, but we're going to talk about one a little bit more than the other. But Michelle, we'll tap into a little bit of the other one too. It is The Joy of Being Selfish. You can get that on bookstands now, Amazon, whatever you prefer. And also her other book, it's Am I Ugly? So definitely check out both of those books. I think they're great reads. And Michelle Elman, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate you today.
Thank you for having me on.
First of all, can you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself that I didn't even get into?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a life coach and an author, and the kind of books I write are mainly in the personal development field. And my first one was very much about body image because I went through my own personal journey of going through 15 surgeries that left me with surgery scars. I battled my own insecurities around that, came out the other side, became a life coach. And then my next part of my journey, I guess, was this journey of boundaries and learning how to set them. And that became and turned into my second book, The Joy of Being Selfish. And so it's one of my passion topics to talk about. But aside from that, I am a podcast host of a podcast called In All Honesty. I'm a public speaker. And that kind of is all the elements of my job. I have a very millennial job where you can't really define it.
A little bit of everything. Now, I definitely hear you for that. What would you tell some of these girls that, they're on Instagram, they're, fixated on these women that honestly, and I'm sure you know this, I'm sure you tell your clients this, a lot of these women on Instagram and the men too, it's fake. They play around with the pictures. They play around with the lighting. It's all fake. They all have different bodies that they're not showing you. So how would you talk to young girls about that before we even get in the meat and potatoes in the interview?
Well, I think it's really important that we educate people from a young age on digital literacy so that we can actually see the difference between an edited photo and unedited photo. When we don't know the difference between filters and Photoshop and Facetune, it's really easy to buy into these images as reality. But I think there's a broader issue in that when it comes to women, if you're not seen as beautiful, you often aren't listened to at all. So even like in a business meeting, or if I do public speaking, God forbid I'm not wearing any makeup, it's seen as unprofessional because somehow that's meant to affect my job. And it actually was quite revolutionary in the beginning of my career, especially on Instagram, that I would turn up on Instagram makeup free. I do all of my talks makeup free. And I'm wearing makeup at the moment, but not always. And it doesn't affect my performance. Yet as a society, we send that message all the time. And younger girls are listening to this. And so it's a lot about being liked, being lovable, being seen as good enough within society. And so the ultimate thing that I would tell anyone growing up is that you are more than your beauty, and to remind yourself of that. So one of the greatest things I ever did was actually just accept I was ugly at 15 years old. Because, and as much as I don't believe that now, that ended up being a really liberating thing, because I was like, great, I'm ugly, but ugly people live fulfilled lives all the time. I'll just be one of those ugly people. And so I went about life, and I mean, it's laughable now, but I went about life actually throwing myself into other things. And it's almost as soon as I made that decision that my beauty was going to be less important, I actually threw myself into a lot of leadership roles. And then I realized how much more important my brain was, how much more important all these other attributes of myself I didn't realize. Like, I'm really stubborn, and that could be a really good thing. I'm really strong-willed, makes a great leader. Like, all of these things that I didn't even notice, because when you spend all day, especially at that age around like 15, talking about how you're going to lose weight, your body, oh, I don't like my thighs. That's every lunchtime. And it was just this moment where I realized my brother's like less than a year older than me. And I was like, my brother's not sitting around every lunchtime talking about how ugly his thighs are. He's actually talking about important things that matter. And so once you make that mindset shift, it's almost like I didn't work on trying to find myself beautiful. And then once I liked the other aspects of myself, the beauty part didn't matter, but then ironically I did actually find myself more beautiful.
Would you agree that this really kicked up I guess I should say, as far as the question, when social media really jumped up in everybody's lives?
I think we became more aware of our
Mhm.
appearance when less so with social media and more so with the invention of cameras on our phones, because
Okay.
before then we only had, for me, I had a picture once a year at my birthday. That was it. You look in the mirror first thing in the morning, maybe when you're brushing your teeth and brushing your hair, but then you went on and lived your life. You didn't
Right.
keep checking your appearance. Once we got cameras on our phones, it was this hyper awareness of what we look like all the time. And I just think, especially when it comes to women and especially the misogyny you bring up,
Mhm.
it's a way to try to control women. Because as I say, like, if you feel like you're not good enough, you're never going to use your voice. You're never going to stand up for yourself. You're never even going to have opinions because you don't feel like you're worthy listening to. And so as soon as you start disregarding your beauty or not accepting the societal message that you need to be beautiful in order to be listened to, that's when you start gaining your power back.
You women are starting to gain more power as far as dating due to sites like, Bumble, as far as that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased because I have worked with Bumble. And so
Oh,
the
okay.
actual messaging behind Bumble is the fact that it was created by a woman who is very
Right.
feminist and was sick of these unsolicited dick pics and all those kind of things. And so you still both have to match, but it is the woman starting the conversation first. And it is to reverse that thing of women are meant to just sit back and wait until men hit on them and we get to like sift through whoever hits on us. I think I've always been a go-getter in my job, and I always found it a bit strange that I was supposedly meant to be a go-getter in my job, and then suddenly when it comes to dating, I'm meant to like sit back and see who's interested in me. And it was actually really interesting because when I was about 19, I remember one of my friends coming up to me, and she was very drunk, and friend is a loose term, but she actually said the phrase that how do more guys hit on you when you're bigger than me? And I didn't take it personally, and I was like, you know what, that's your stuff. Like, I don't have an issue with my body, but you go ahead. And I said to her very simply, because I'm the person walking up to them in the bar, turning to them and going, hey, how are you? How's your night going? And
Mm.
you're the person in the corner of the room crying because no one's coming up to you. Who do you think is more interesting? Forget looks for a second. And this is what I mean by we put too much emphasis in looks. Forget looks completely.
Right.
I have made myself more accessible. I have made myself more approachable. You sitting in the corner of the room looking like you have a miserable time, what person, forget man, what person wants to join you in that? And so sometimes when we talk about dating, and dating apps don't particularly help with this because you do look at a picture and you swipe based on the picture, but like it's about so much more. And ultimately, when it comes to dating, aesthetics only gets you so far. Aesthetics gets you the first date, because let's say they don't exactly look like their picture, then you've got as far as the first date. But you're not going to get a second date just on looks alone. There are so many people who you'll find attractive physically who will get to a first date, but not a second date, because there's so much more to that. And I think we need to start putting more emphasis in the second date, and we need to put more emphasis in, okay, but do you bring other things to the table? Do you bring whatever you're looking for, whether that's an ambition or someone who's fun loving or someone who's passionate about life, whatever it is? Those aspects are so much more what makes a relationship last.
The joy of being selfish. We were taught as a child to always be selfless. So you come out with the book, Michelle, and say the joy of being selfish. Tell us why you wrote the book and what that means in general.
Well, I just think we keep talking about self-care and self-love, and we're dodging the real big issue here, which is you actually need to put yourself as a higher priority if you want to make time for yourself. You can talk about self-love and self-care, but ultimately, like, they're just being used as words to market the latest bath bomb or whatever now, rather than actually going, okay, but what is self-love? What else is self-care? That's saying no to your boss when he emails you at 10 o'clock at night. It's saying self-care might be saying no to your mum when she's body shaming you. It's all of these moments where you're being treated like rubbish, and it's the first time you're standing up for yourself and going, you can't speak to me like that. I'm not going to stand here and listen to you while you yell at me. You cannot raise your voice at me. And it's having those moments of having self-worth, of knowing how you deserve to be treated. And that's ultimately all boundaries are. It's how you teach the world to treat you. It's the line between who you are and who the world wants you to be.
So how do we discover joy in being selfish? I know you kind of explained it a little bit in the last answer, but we've had this kind of, as I said earlier, we've had this brainwashed into our mind that, if somebody says, hey, I need help, you should really, most people, unless they're, real jerks, I guess, would help somebody in need. But I know you're not talking about that as far as that aspect goes. But, how do we finally say no to our boss or a friend that's just being needy constantly all the time, that just wants that attention? Or like you said, a parent that's trying to belittle you and constantly just act mean.
Well, let's go back to the example you used around if someone asks you to do something and you want
Yeah.
to be helpful, you feel like you should be selfless, blah, blah. If you want to do it out of the goodness of your heart, do it out of the goodness of your heart. What most people do, though, is they say yes to it. And then down the road, whether that's 2 weeks or 2 months, they go, oh, well, you weren't there for me when I was there for you. I did that for you when you wanted. And it's this like counting points, like, well, I did this, therefore you did that. That means you didn't do it out of the goodness of your heart. That means you didn't do it because you were selfless. It's because you thought it was an exchange system. And therefore what happens is, because normally, well, some people will be like, hey, I did this for you and you didn't do this for me. But if you have bad boundaries, usually you won't say that. Instead, what you will say is, you won't say anything, and instead you'll feel resentment, and you'll hold on to that resentment, and it will seep out in passive aggressive comments until one day you blow up. And so is any of this actually selfless? And that's when you actually have to look at the definition of the word selfless, to forget yourself. So why are we complimenting people on forgetting themselves? And if you actually know someone who forgets themselves a lot, it's a really difficult position to be in when you're in a relationship with that person, whether that's romantic or platonic, because that person never looks after themselves. So you spend your whole life worrying about them. And if you do know someone like this, you'll spend time going, oh, well, I really hope they're not overworking themselves. I hope they're not burnt out. All of these things that you can't actually help them do unless they realize themselves, oh, I'm overworking. Oh, I need a holiday. Oh, I need whatever it is. Like, I need to actually move out and not live with my parents anymore because they're taking up so much of my time. Knowing your limits is actually the most loving thing you can do for the people around you, because it means you actually communicate what you mean, and you mean what you say, and you say what you mean.
So let's end with this. What do you hope the people learn from your book and from this interview in general, Michelle?
I hope that people know that they deserve to set boundaries, and that you're allowed to say no, and that it's your life, so you're allowed to put yourself first, and that you are doing the people in your life the greatest favor by looking after yourself.
Okay. And where can people find you, Michelle?
So I'm at Scarred Not Scared on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all the things. My website is www.michelleelman.com, and my 2 books are The Joy of Being Selfish and Am I Ugly?
Michelle Elman, thanks so much. And thanks for listening to my story time too.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, Michelle, thanks. Have a good
Bye.
day. All right, bye-bye now.